Welcome, you guys.
Shalom.
We are so glad you guys have tuned in to looking through the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. We are getting down to Exodus. We are finally, well, not finally, but I mean, we're getting through another book. So we're not done yet. We still have a couple more chapters left in Exodus, but, you know, we're getting down to where it's like, okay, the countdown now, you know? So this is exciting. So we're glad you're here. We have been talking through the Torah portions through the lens of relationships. So relationships, we're not just talking about husband and wife. We're talking about relationships with our fellow humans that are out there, people that we have relationships with and people that we don't have relationships with, but we interact with. So those could be our coworkers, our family, our friends, children, grandparents. I mean, just think of everybody, your neighbor next door, possibly people that you have relationships with that are humans. We are talking about how to have a relationship with them. So let's get started.
The portion we're in this week is Parsha Kitessa. It basically means when you take. And that's going to be Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 30, verse 11, through chapter 34, verse 35. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and read chapter 30, verses 11 through 16. Want to read that?
Sure. 11 through 16. Then the Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, when you take a census of the sons of Israel to number them, then each one of them shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord. When you number them, that they may no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone is numbered shall give, half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. The shekel is 20 gerals. Half a shekel as a contribution to the Lord. Everyone who is numbered from 20 years old and over shall give the contribution to the Lord. The rich shall not pay more, and the poor shall not pay less than the half shekel, when you give the contribution to the Lord to make atonement for yourself. And you shall take the atonement money from the sons of Israel, and shall give it for the service of the tent meeting, that it may be a memorial for the sons of Israel before the Lord to make atonement for yourself.
So we're given a command here on the method to take a census of Israel.
Yeah.
And the census was taken by way of a mandatory offering. Every male from age 20 above, they gave a half a shekel of silver as a covering or a ransom for his life. And this was used for the service of the tabernacle, to provide for the needs and the upkeep of the tabernacle. So we're going to look at that basically in relationships. There are things that we give voluntarily. We can see that in one of the last portions we did, chapter 25. But there are some things we give that are mandatory. It's only mandatory if we want to have the relationship. It's, you know, if we're not going to do those mandatory things, we're not going to provide what's required for the relationship, then the relationship's just going to stagnate and slip away. So, you know, what are, you know, some of the mandatory things that we can think of that are required for relationships?
Some of it's love. You know, I mean, that's a requirement, you know, is for us to be able to love our spouse, to be able to love somebody when we're looking at a relationship between a husband and wife or a potential spouse. You want to love them. You know, that is a requirement, is to be able to love them. Love them
in a way that they feel loved.
Yeah, because each person is going to feel loved by different ways, you know, but it's a matter of figuring out what is that love, you know, what does that love look like between the two of you?
Yeah. You know, some other things, like we could look, every relationship is different and unique, but there are some things that the scripture speaks to about things that we could think of as they're mandatory for especially a husband and wife relationship.
Yeah.
Love, understanding, respect, intimacy. You know, those are some things that are mandatory, and we could look at those as kind of things that are maintenance required. It's what's required to maintain the relationship.
Yeah.
That's the mandatory things. But there's also voluntary things.
Yeah.
So I mean, what kind of things would be voluntary, or things that actually help the relationship to grow and go deeper?
Some of it could be a hobby. You know, maybe it's one hobby that one person likes and the other person is not crazy about that hobby, but they're going to go ahead and do that because they love that person. You know, if we look at movies, you know, some people really like certain kinds of movies. So they're going to go see every single kind of that kind of movie. But your spouse or the person that you're looking at might not really love that movie. But guess what? You're going to go ahead and be into that movie because you love them. You know, it's the same thing in regards to your kids. One child might be into math and wanting to be a part of the chess club, maybe. You know, so you're going to get them in part of the chess club and you're going to sit down and learn how to go ahead and play chess so they can go ahead and do that. One child might be into the whole science thing and wants to blow things up. So guess what? You're going to go ahead and learn some science and blow some things up with them. It's the same thing when it
lawfully, of course.
Yes. It's the same thing in regards to a spouse. You know, you might love watching a romantic flick, and your spouse might be like, I'd rather not, but you love them, so you're going to go ahead and sit there and watch that movie. Same thing, the other spouse might want to sit and watch all the Star Wars films, and you're like, okay, these aren't my favorite, but I'm going to sit there and watch it because he loves it. You know, so it's a matter of that compromise in a way, and that voluntarily part of it.
Yeah. And I mean, and why we're kind of looking at both of these is if you want to have a relationship that flourishes, that maintains and produces good fruit, then you need to do both. Yeah. You have to do the mandatory things that do the upkeep or the maintenance of the relationship. And you also have to have the voluntary things that allows the relationship to grow and to build. Yeah. So when you maintain what you have and then you grow and build on top of it, that's when the relationship flourishes and bears good fruit.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
So now we're going to go into chapter 31, and I'm going to read just verse 3. And I have filled him with the spirit of Elohim in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge and in all work or in all workmanship or craftsmanship. Basically, our last video on Tetzaveh, we talked a lot about wisdom and understanding and knowledge. And if you haven't seen that one, go back and watch that one because it talks a lot about that. There's some really good stuff. Those are some great things that you need in your relationship toolkit. We're going to talk about the fourth element that's added here, which is work or craftsmanship. The Hebrew word is melakah. And what we're seeing here in this melakah, it's a specific skills that allow you to perform a specific task. In this case, it's allowing Bezalel and Aholiab to be able to do the things that are required to craft all these things and teach others to craft it. Yeah. So what we're going to kind of look at is the specific skills that the Spirit of Elohim has given to you, and also your potential spouse or your spouse. Yeah. And have you been able to recognize the skills that the Spirit of Elohim has given to them? We would call them spiritual gifts. Yeah. And how they use them. Yeah. We're going to jump over into 1 Corinthians and just kind of get an idea of some of these things, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. Can you read 1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 11?
1 Corinthians 12, 4 through 11. Now there are the varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of ministries, and the same Lord. And there are varieties of effects, but the same God, who works in all things in all persons. Through what? 7? But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the coming good. For the one who is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, and to another the word of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, and to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, and to another the effecting of miracles, and to another prophecy, and to another the distinguishing of spirits, to another variation of tongues, and to another the interpretation of tongues.
Yeah, so I mean, all of those are examples of spiritual gifts, right?
Yeah, they are. And the thing is what kind of spiritual gifts do you have? Have you figured out what your spiritual gifts are? You know, there's lots of different tests that are out there that you could go ahead and do to be able to figure out what are your spiritual gifts. What has God given you as your craftsmanship? And how are you going to do that together, possibly as a couple? You know, we're still figuring that out because there are differently spiritual gifts that I have that Mark doesn't have, and vice versa. So it's a matter of how do we work together to be able to have that work within our marriage, but also to be able to minister to the body as well, you know, and the people around us that we have.
Yeah. It's not a matter, and as Paul talks about at length, I believe in this chapter, it's not a matter of one thinking that their gift is higher, so we should focus on that one.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing that all the giftings are used for building up the body of Messiah, also for just building up your own relationship, but then expanding outward to being able to help and build up your children, your family members, your faith community, the whole community at large, using those gifts together to be able to build.
Yeah. You know, I mean, we talk about foundations all the time, and we also talk about the body. So like our hands, our fingers, you know, our arms, our heads, our legs, all of it has to work together. You know, when we look at people who've had an injury, who don't have an arm anymore, don't have a leg anymore, you know, they're having to relearn how to go ahead and function in the way that God intended us to go ahead and function. So it's the same thing in regards to when we all work together and we all have different skills and we come together to be able to work that the way God intended us to go ahead and work, we're able to go ahead and do that is one big body. You know, and again, it's not one more of the other. You know, I used to think of it as, you know, your spiritual gifts were 1, 2, 3, 4 in regards to like, one got elevated more than another. That's not at all what it is. God gave it to us all. You know, it's all on one level playing field, you know, in other words. And it's a matter of us just working within that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it's a good thing to be able to sit down and talk about, you know, and it doesn't matter if you're just dating or if you're married already. You know, if you've been married for 20 plus years, guess what? Your spiritual gifts probably have changed. My spiritual gifts have changed from when I first took this in my early teens to what I am now in my 40s. It definitely has changed because God has molded me. God has used me in different ways at different times. And so in a way, it's one of those things to go back to and be like, okay, God, where am I at right now? You know, what am I using right now in regards to my spiritual gifts? Because sometimes it might be prominent in one during one season of your life and prominent in another in a different season of your life. You know, because we're all in different phases or different seasons of our life.
And we're going to get into this in just a bit, so hang on. But it's important to be paying attention to how your spouses grow.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to get into that in just a little bit, but that's, you know, the spiritual gifts is one thing that you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Like, how are they now, and as you continue in your relationship, how are you both growing together? Yeah. Next is chapter 32, famous chapter. We're not going to read any of the scriptures in it, but basically just talk about what it says. It's the tragedy of the golden calf, the first recorded unfaithfulness to the newly established covenant between Yah and Israel. The consequences of Israel's unfaithfulness is the deaths of 3,000 men and plague on the people. But worse than that is the broken covenant. It's symbolized by the broken tablets of the testimony that Moses smashed when he came down the mountain, when he saw the idolatry, the unfaithfulness, the spiritual adultery of the people. So the consequences are broken relationship, broken covenant, and repairing and restoring a broken covenant is difficult. It's sometimes impossible, but at the least it's very difficult to do. So this returns us to the concept of Shema. Shema it means to guard. Yeah. It's sometimes translated as keep, observe, watch over, but really it means to guard and to protect. So this is what we need to do, is to guard and protect our covenant relationships, both with Elohim, but also with our spouse or future spouse. Having that covenant relationship with Elohim and with the spouse is a privilege, and we should never take it for granted. Yeah. It's a privilege that we get to have, and it's our responsibility to guard the relationships and not to allow anyone to interfere with them, to come between you and your Elohim or to come between you and your spouse. Yeah. So the problem that happened here, what happened is a result of not guarding, you know, their covenant faithfulness. That's actually the root of the problem. Yeah.
And going back to your old ways, you know, going back to you've made that turn, you know, you've entered in that covenant relationship with Yeshua, you've entered in that relationship with a husband or a wife, and now all of a sudden you've decided to turn back around and go back to your old ways. Well, we don't live in our old ways. We're changed people. We're a married couple now. We can't go back to being single again. I can't go back to being selfish and wanting to do what I want to do. Now I'm in a relationship, and now I have to think about somebody else. It's the same thing in regards to when you have kids. Your life changes when you have a child. They rely on you for food. They rely on you to be able to put them to bed when they're tired. Yeah, they might collapse on the floor after being up for 6 hours, especially if they're a little baby, but it's like they need you to go ahead and keep track of some of those things because they're relying on you. Unfortunately, if you're being a selfish parent and not doing some of that, you're hurting your child. We don't want to hurt our kids and be that way. So it's a matter of needing to guard that relationship and to be able to look out for that other person.
Yeah. I mean, and both parts of the relationship is responsible for protecting the relationship and protecting each other.
Yeah.
But protecting the relationship, making sure that nothing comes between.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to allow, I am a guard.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get past me to interfere with my relationship with my wife or her husband or with my Elohim. You're not going to get in there and interfere with that.
Yeah.
That's the idea, and it's one of the most important ideas that we get in the whole of Scripture is guarding that covenant relationship.
I heard one married couple say that when they go to church, they don't sit on either side of the pew and their kids sit in the center, where the kids are on either side of the parent, the parents are sitting next to each other, and the kids are sitting on either side of the parent, but the parents are not allowing the kids to come between them. And I thought that was a really cool analogy of realizing that when kids come into your life, come into your family, they sort of take over in a way, because you're having to go ahead and give to them. But your spouse came first.
Yes.
Your spouse was there first. And so you need to guard that relationship and not allow other people, other influences, the kids to be able to come in and take over that relationship, Yeah. So that's one thing that I've talked to Mark about is like, okay, when we have kids, I don't want kids to be between us. I want the child to be on either side of us. Or possibly in our lap or whatever, the case may be. But I don't want to have a child to be in between us because I feel like that is putting it between us, and that to me is just a visual. So every time I see parents that do that, they might unknowingly do that, but I feel like that separates them versus them coming together, especially at a church service, especially at a time of that area where you can sort of worship together.
And in much the same way, and we're going to talk about this also in a little while, but hopefully you came into your marriage covenant already being in another covenant with the Creator, right? So we're not going to allow the marriage covenant to interfere with that prior existing covenant.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means and how that fleshes out. But you're going to be entering a covenant together with Him, but you can't enter into a covenant that interferes with that other covenant, which is even more important between you and your Creator.
Yeah. Yep. That's true.
Chapter 33. We're going to go ahead and read verses 11 through 13.
I'll let you do that.
Okay. Thus the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And he would return to the camp, but his servant Yehoshua son of Nun, a young man, did not leave the tent. And Moshe said to the Lord, See, you are saying to me, bring up this people, but you have not made known to me whom you would send with me. Though you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my eyes. And now, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please show me your way, and let me know you, so that I find favor in your eyes.
Yeah.
And consider that this nation is your people. So this chapter is focusing in on the relationship between Yah, the Lord, and Moses.
Yeah.
Yah spoke to Moses panim el panim, or face to face, as a man, as an ish, would speak to his friend, which is ra'ah. That's the Hebrew there that's translated friend. Ra'ah is commonly translated as neighbor, such as in Vayikra, Leviticus 19:18, we're very familiar with, to love your neighbor, love your Ra'ah as yourself. So Yah treated Moses as a Ra'ah, as a friend or a neighbor or a companion. Moses was able to speak with Yah in a manner unlike most other characters of Scripture. So in 33:13, we see Moses asking a favor from his friend, from his companion, from his neighbor, much like we would ask a favor from another person whom we're in relationship with. The thing is, in order to ask a favor and have it granted, the relationship has to be in good standing. In other words, the other person usually isn't going to grant that request or that favor if they're angry with you or displeased with your behavior. And through the course of this chapter, we see that indeed Moses' relationship with Yah was in good standing, that Yah favored him.
Yeah. So what's your relationship with Yeshua? What's your covenant relationship with him? Do you have a good relationship with him? If you don't, guess what? You can start today. You can go ahead and start today. Every single day you make a choice to be able to have a relationship with him or don't have a relationship with him. And when you have that relationship with him, hopefully you're able to allow him to go ahead and help guide you and direct you into the way that you're supposed to go ahead and go. And that is by looking at his word. And what does his word have to say for us to be able to have a relationship with him?
Yeah, he told us quite simply in a few places. I mean, first he tells us in the Ten Commandments, right? But then we go into like John chapter 14 where he repeats that and he says, if you love me, then do what I said. Obey my commands is what he says. So, I mean, if you want to have that good standing and that good relationship, then do what he said to do. That's kind of part of this. So Moses makes a few. He doesn't just ask one favor; he actually asks a few favors. Inside of this, but we can kind of see that the main thrust, what he's trying to get at, is this thing that he said, that Yah said to him earlier in the chapter, like, I'm not going with you guys because if I go, you're stiff necked, and I can't go with you guys. And Moses is asking him to reconsider that. And he's not asking on behalf of the people. Moses is asking him to consider it in light of the relationship between Yah and Moses, because they do have a relationship that's in good standing. And because of that relationship, Yah said, okay, request granted. I will go with you. We do get that in verse 14. He says, and he said, my presence does go, and I shall give you rest. Another favor that he asks, and this is very important. He asks in verse 13, now please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please show me your way. We're familiar with the way word, is the derek, but it's the path that we're supposed to walk. But show me your way. And then he says, let me know you. And that Hebrew is yada, which is that word that denotes intimate relationship, the kind of relationship between a man and a wife, husband and a wife. So he asks, show me your ways, the way that you operate, and let me know you. Let me have that intimate relationship with you. So why? So that I can find favor in your eyes, so that I can keep this relationship in good standing. It's almost like he's saying, I'm really glad that right now our relationship is in good standing, but I want to know more about you so that I can continue to keep this relationship in good standing.
And when you're in a good relationship, you want to get to know that person as much as possible. You want to know what their likes and their dislikes are. You want to be able to know their favorite everything, so it's the same thing in regards to, we should have that hunger for Yeshua as well. Is getting to know him and what he likes and what he dislikes. And when we find out what he dislikes, we don't want to do those things, because we're showing honor to that person when we're able to go ahead and show them that we love them and want to do those things for them.
So moving on into chapter 34, we are going to see that Yah is going to allow Moses to know his ways. He's going to tell him his ways. If we go ahead and read chapter 34, verses 5 through 7, It says that Yah came down in the cloud, and he stood with him there, and he proclaimed the name Yah. And Yah passed before him and proclaimed, Yah, Yah, and Elohim, compassionate and showing favor, patient and great in loving kindness and truth, watching over loving kindness for thousands, forgiving crookedness and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished, visiting the crookedness of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and the fourth generation. Yeah. This list is commonly known as the 13 attributes of Adonai. Now, if you look at it, you'd be like, where do you get 13? Well, the number 13 is not nearly as important as the content of what is there. Mm-hmm. Yah is showing Moses his ways. These are the ways that I operate. So, like we were just talking about a little while ago, you have to learn about a person that you're in relationship with. As far as, with Elohim, knowing his ways and imitating them in our limited ability is the path to good relationship with him. He is compassionate, so we are to act with compassion. He is slow to anger, so we should be patient and slow to anger. Yeah. Doing these things, and some people, kind of get a little sideways on this. It's not the path to enter into his covenant. Mm-hmm. But rather, it's the path to maintain those good covenant relations in terms that many would understand. We don't imitate him in order to be saved or to be in covenant, but we imitate him because we are saved or we are in covenant. So now let's apply this to our second most important relationship, a relationship between a husband and a wife. Yeah. It's got to be our desire to know them. Yeah. Their ways, their likes, their dislikes, their tendencies, their strengths and weaknesses, as much as we can possibly learn about them. And we do this on a continual basis throughout the course of the relationship. And it's the same way. Why? Why did Moses want to know these things? Why did he want to know his ways? And why did he want to have that good relationship with him? It's because he wanted to find favor in his eyes. Now, if we have both spouses doing this, if they make it a priority to know each other, to do things that please each other, to continually learn and observe the growth that is happening in the person, then the marriage relationship can be maintained. It can grow. It can flourish. It can bear good fruit, not only for the husband and the wife, but also for their children, as well as all the other lives that they are able to touch together.
Exactly. It's a matter of needing to know your spouse. In your first year of marriage, you're getting to know them at one level, and then after many years of being married, some people change. You change in and out, you grow. You grow spiritually, you grow into a different job possibly, or into different roles. And so you're learning to grow with them and learning to know a little bit more likes and dislikes. Maybe they realize, oh, guess what? I like tomatoes now. Let's go ahead and have more tomatoes. That's not us at all.
No. We like tomato products.
We like tomato products, yes, but not tomatoes. But it's a matter of needing to know them. If you look at a child, okay, kids are a good example of that, because as they continue to grow, their interests continue to change because you're introducing more things to them. Maybe they weren't into sports last year, but guess what? Now they're into sports. Maybe they're into reading more. Maybe they're into whatever it might be that they're into. They're growing. And so because of that, you're learning more about them, of their likes and their dislikes. It's the same thing in regards to marriage. You need to be able to get to know your spouse a little bit more. When you've been married to somebody for 40 years, hopefully there's been some change. Maybe they've tried a new candy bar and they're like, oh my gosh, I really like this new candy bar now. Or I really like, going on trips to this place versus this place, because they've been to that country before and they're like, I thought I would like it and I really don't. Let's go this way instead. It's a matter of getting to know them a little bit more to be able to just dig deeper and to be able to grow that relationship even more.
Yeah, this is a matter of the other huge tool in your relationship toolkit, which is Shema.
Yeah.
You have to listen or pay attention
Yeah.
to the person that you're in a relationship with. Look for the clues, look
Yeah.
for the hints, look for the growth. And then not just listen and pay attention, but then respond appropriately.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what you're doing. You're looking to see, you know, what's the new things that is going on in your partner's life. How can I, you know, feed, you know, the healthy growth, you know, that they continue to grow and we continue to grow together and we don't stagnate.
Yep. Yep. So the other part too, in regards to chapter 34 is sort of verse 10 through, I think I wrote down 17.
Yeah, 17.
I'm going to read parts of it because I really think it's really good.
Yeah.
Verse 11, be sure to observe what I am commanding you this day. Behold, I'm going to drive out the Amorite before you, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Pesite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, and all the sites. Watch yourself that you might make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land into which you are going, lest it become a snare in your midst. But rather you are to tear down their altars and smash their sacred pillars and cut down their Asherim. For you shall not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and someone invite you to eat of his sacrifice. And you take some of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and cause your sons also to play the harlot with their gods. You shall make for yourself no molted gods. So, missionary dating, people. Let's not do it. Here you've come into this walk with God. Here you're keeping the feast. You're keeping the Sabbath. You are going to Sukkot. You're doing unleavened bread. You've celebrated Passover. And now all of a sudden you've met somebody. And they might not keep the feast. They might not keep Sabbath. What are you supposed to do?
Maybe they don't eat kosher.
Maybe they don't eat kosher. You know, here you go. You go on a date with them. And guess what? They get a burger with bacon on it. And you're like, okay, now what do I do? Well, don't missionary date. You know, don't do it. Just don't get into a covenant relationship with somebody who does not follow covenant. You know, who does not follow the same things that you go ahead and do. Just don't do it. You know, don't be tempted. Don't put yourself in that spot to be able to go ahead and do it. That is why we created Hebrew Sheber website. We created a website for you, so the foundation of Yeshua is right there. The foundation of keeping Sabbath is right there. The foundation of keeping the feasts are right there. We have a website for you to be able to go meet other like-minded Torah follower singles. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, that's honestly what it is don't go to the other websites. Don't join the other groups that are out there. You know, find a place, find your home within your fellowship, within your community of people where you are able to go ahead and find like-minded people. I know friends who have traveled plane ticket wise to be able to fly to go to a feast, to be able to go to an event where they're able to meet other singles because they're wanting to go ahead and get married to somebody who keeps the same things that they do. They keep the covenant. You know, you don't want to go into a relationship with somebody who does not keep covenant. Now, other side of that, let's say you are married now. You all of a sudden have found that you should eat kosher. You shouldn't eat bacon. You shouldn't eat lobster. And your spouse doesn't want to go ahead and follow those things. Doesn't mean you go out and get divorced. That doesn't mean that at all. It means that you might need to have extra grace for them. It might mean that you need to go ahead and build a bridge and not a wall up. It might mean you need to have a conversation with them and be like, guess what, babe? We're going to go turkey route now. You know, we're going to have the turkey bacon and the beef bacon and then you can have duck, right?
Oh.
Yeah, you can have duck bacon. Duck bacon is actually really good and beef bacon is. So it's a matter of finding those other things to go ahead and do and have that sit down conversation with your spouse and be like, hey babe, so this is what I found out. Can we study this out together? Can we have this conversation together? You know, can we figure those things out? Pray about it. Ask God. He's going to help you. He's going to seek, you know, and he's going to help you figure that part out. You know, he's not going to give something to you that I think is going to cause division within that. He's not going to cause chaos. He doesn't want chaos. Now, the enemy might come in and might do some other things, and that's where you have to get on your knees and pray some more. That's where you might have to seek other guidance and other wisdom from other people to figure out, okay, how do I walk through this route? What do I need to go ahead and do now? And that's where the community of people can go ahead and step up and help. That's where your neighbor can come in and help. That's where other people in your life can go ahead and help you to figure out what to go ahead and do in that circumstance. But it's a matter of not getting originally into covenant with somebody who is not in covenant with God.
You've got to guard that relationship with Elohim.
Yeah.
And one of the easiest ways to cause interference is to do what it says here.
Yeah.
And you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot after their gods.
Yeah.
And they make your sons do it because the heartstrings, the emotions are going to get wrapped up.
Yeah.
And it's going to turn into an effort more of pleasing them than pleasing your Elohim.
Yeah.
So that's why he's cautioning against that. That's why you see in the Brit Hadashah, you see Rav Shaul Paul talking about that. He also speaks about what Sarah was talking about. If you find yourself in that relationship, and he gives good counsel about that. But if you're not in the relationship already and you're looking to find someone for a relationship, then you don't want to do this thing that Sarah called missionary dating. Yeah,
you want to be able to guard that relationship. And that's why it's really important to be able to have those conversations in the beginning of a friendship, before you are in a committed relationship, before you commit to somebody. You want to have those conversations to be like, how do you celebrate Shabbat? How do you celebrate the feast? What is important to you? What is not important to you? How do you want to raise your kids? Do you want to homeschool? Do you not want to homeschool? What choices are you wanting to go ahead and make within that relationship so you're able to know, okay, does this line up with what God wants me to go ahead and do? It goes back to our conversation that we've had before about making your list. What is on your list when it comes to looking for a spouse? What do you have to offer somebody when it comes to having a relationship with a spouse? And so it all correlates, people.
It does.
Yeah.
So, as we've been studying these Torah portions and all of Scripture through the lens of relationship, we're continuing to uncover new lessons, and we're continuing to revisit lessons that are already covered at the past. We're looking at mandatory and voluntary offerings. And it allowed us to discuss both maintenance of relationships and growth of relationships. Now, when you do both, that's going to allow your relationships to flourish and to be successful. And that's what we want. We want successful relationships. When we looked into that new element of melakah, or skill, that was given to Bezalel, that gave us the opportunity to look at spiritual gifts, spiritual skills that Elohim has given to both of us, how a husband and wife can use them together to build up Elohim's household. We saw the tragedy of broken covenant, the need to shamar, to guard our relationships from anyone or anything that would interfere with our covenant, both with Elohim and with our spouse. The parsha speaks about a lesson we've seen time and time again. The key to successful relationships is Shema ve'shamar, to pay attention to and to guard your relationships. And finally, through Yah's revelation of his ways to Moshe, it's commonly known as the 13 attributes to Adonai, we learned that a relationship that flourishes is a relationship where each partner continually seeks to learn more about the other in an effort to know them and do your best to please them, to keep the relationship in good standing. All these lessons and a lot more can be found within Parashat Tissa. And we hope you will continue to join us as we continue to mine the depths of the word of Elohim to have successful relationships.
Yeah, I really hope you guys are enjoying these little lessons, from the Torah portion through the lens of relationships. It definitely is opening up our eyes when we read other books of the Bible and seeing all the strings of relationships that are there.